Hey folks, Matt here with a cold open. This episode marks the 1-year anniversary of Dungeon Master Diaries. Ironically, it just so happens that today's episode is about an RPG other than Shadowdark, actually 2 different RPGs, but regardless, it marks a fairly significant milestone. It has been a joy for Jody and I to make this show, and we hope to continue making it as long as we're running Shadowdark and other role-playing games. If you would like to ask a question or suggest a topic for a future episode, we're going to leave a simple Google form link in the show notes from now on. And this will help keep those suggestions and submissions in one place so we can reference them easier later on. As always, thank you for listening, and here's to another year of Dungeon Master Diaries. Now, on with the show. You're tuned in to the Stingbat Radio Network on FM 101.2 KRPG.
Welcome to Dungeon Master Diaries, a podcast about Shadowdark and other role-playing games where 2 GMs talk about their recent experiences at the table and hopefully give you something useful you can take to yours. On the show today, we discuss Tales from the Loop and Kids on Bikes. Hello there, sages and adventurers and kids on bikes and ne'er-do-wells and punk rockers and metalheads. My name is Jody, and with me, as always, is my good friend and GM colleague, Matt. How are you, sir?
Hey, dude, if you want to get on this arcade, you're going to have to put your quarter up on the man, I totally messed this up.
Again, that's okay. You didn't live in that time, but I did, and it was dope. Today's episode focuses on a recent campaign set in the Tales from the Loop setting, and using the Kids on Bikes 2nd edition rules. Matt, you ran this little masterpiece, so take us to the table.
Black screen. A soft synth pad hums airy and strange. Text fades in slowly with a CRT-style flicker. Whitened edges, a subtle keystroke sound. Boulder City, Nevada, 1987. We cut to the Nevada desert. It's early morning. We see a magnetrine freighter drifting low over the sun-scorched landscape. Its undercarriage groans, heavy anti-gravity thrusters glowing blue scattering dust and static across the sagebrush. Rust flakes from its hull. A serial number reads Gauss Industries, Unit 334-A. The camera cuts to a group of kids riding their bikes down a narrow trail beneath loop pylons, their cables humming. We cut to a CRT monitor flickering in the dark of a strip mall arcade, the glow strobing across a kid's wide eyes. We cut again. This time, we see a chain-link fence glowing faintly behind what appears to be a municipal golf course, guarded by a slowly rotating auto turret. Cut to a barn. Looks like it's been turned into a lab filled with tools stolen from a school's AV closet. A beaker bubbles, steam fogging the screen of an old Apple IIe. Finally, we cut to a missing persons flyer fluttering on a telephone pole. She's been gone for 6 days. We hear the voice of a narrator over all those images. Nestled between the Hoover Dam and the neon sprawl of Las Vegas lies Boulder City, a dry, quiet town that time almost forgot. No casinos, no traffic, just sun-bleached streets, desert wind, and the low hum of secrets buried deep beneath the ground. The grown-ups, well, they don't ask too many questions. Well, maybe they just stop listening. They talk about water shortages, Cold War tension, and the rising price of gas. They say things were better before TV, better before the recession, before the wall went up, before the divorce. But the kids, they're listening. They're watching. They're riding past the salvage yard through the bowling alley parking lot down to the edge of Lake Mead, where drone parts wash up and cable snakes twitch half buried in the sand. They hear the rumors that someone's mom worked for DART and saw something she wasn't supposed to. That the pen factory's not making pens anymore, just noise. And that if you follow the old rail line past mile marker 12, you'll find a breach in the fence that wasn't there last week. This is a story about a year that changed everything, about revenge and genius, about friendship and lies. The grown-ups can't help you. The machines, they might not listen. And you? Well, you're just a kid. But in Boulder City, that might just be enough. Blackout, and we see a title card appear on the screen that just says, The 4 Seasons of Mad Science. And the font glitches. We see some secondary text that flashes below that reads, Property of DART / Echo Core Protocol / Level 7 access required. Authentication violation detected. Fade to black.
All right, let us gather round the neon glow of this particular fire in 8-bit Technicolor fantasticness. Yeah. Man, what a freaking treat it was to get to sit in for 3 of these 4 sessions, experiencing the world of Tales from the Loop and the system of Kids on Bikes. Matt, what has now become your calling card within our play group, as I think one of our players pointed out, you mashed up 2 different games to magical effect for a summer campaign of nostalgia that others didn't have, except I'm sure as heck did. Man, where did this all come from? How did this little seed start for you? And then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, so I've been wanting to run Tales from the Loop, the setting, for a long time, and there's an RPG attached to it. It is published by Free League, and it is based on an absolutely incredible art book by, I believe, a Swedish author. We'll put the information in the show notes. I cannot recommend enough for the folks that it speaks to. It's just so atmospheric and wonderful. And it is about the 1980s and 80s that never was. And the art was actually made into an Amazon series that I think was very polarizing because it moved slower than, I don't know, someone moving through a gelatinous substance in a dungeon. But the thing that I love about it, and the thing that I think we'll talk through and I hope came through in the campaign, was how disquieting the setting is, how the nostalgia and weirdness, and there's not horror in the traditional sense, but there is just like this underlying discomfort that I think is, it means that you can never really feel like everything is okay. And like, I to me, that's the kind of fiction I love. I love when things are just ever so slightly not right.
And they weren't, and yet they were. Like, right. That mood definitely was conveyed through your own GMing lens. And yet the world is so familiar that it sings in a way that is immediately accessible. And I think it's worth noting here that our play group was players, and this is actually, I think, important for this one. And maybe this is a little bit a conversation for later, but the players were from early 30s to me, who is sneaking ever closer to 50. So I don't know if really one other player definitely had some knowledge of 1987 as a functional time of life, of I was out and about and living, and was, in my case, was very much a kid on a bike in 1987. So there's that element of intense familiarity. And also thanks to movies like E.T. and Stranger Things being the kind of obvious analog, but then also the Tales from the Loop show, which I have not seen. There's an amount of disquiet, and you know there's something more. And I love, and maybe that's what drew you in. He asked questioningly, is this game in this world is so upfront about the stakes and the dynamics of how things work. There was some truths that were presented to us as players,
yes,
right off the top. And to me, this screams Matt. And like, this is Matt's jam as a GM and player, and also is really good as a player coming to the system because it tells you where to set your compass without telling you how to play.
Okay, so I want to say from the beginning that the reason that I wanted to run this game using kids on bikes was, frankly, I'm not a huge fan of the year zero engine that Free League uses very frequently in their games. I've been wanting to run kids on bikes for a long time because the core system, which is you have a die type that is attached to a statistic or an attribute, and you roll that die and you're trying to hit a target number, is just, to me, it just was such a wonderful, it uses exploding dice, which I love. I love games that use exploding dice. I just felt like it was going to be like a marriage of a largely setting agnostic system and a setting that I loved, combined with, and I'm going to read these to you, and then you can take everything that I just said and pull out what you want to talk about, because I'm interested to hear as a player what your experience is like, because we really haven't talked about this very much. We've actually tried to really preserve this conversation for right now. But here are the principles of the loop. This is literally from the Tales from the Loop rulebook. Number 1, your hometown is full of strange and fantastic things, like giant robots and time portals and creatures in the shadows. Number 2, everyday life is dull and unforgiving, chores, broken bikes, mean teachers, and being grounded. Number 3, adults are out of reach and out of touch. They don't believe you, they don't listen, and when they do help, it usually comes at a cost. Number 4, the land of the loop is dangerous, but kids will not die. You can get hurt, scared, or lost, but you don't die in this story. Number 5, the game is played scene by scene. We skip the boring parts. We focus on the big moments, just like a movie or a TV show, hence the intro. And number 6, the world is described collaboratively. Everyone helps build this town. You help describe the weather, the weird, the wonder, ask questions, make it yours. That, coupled with the setting that I knew that everyone was going to vibe with, because I kind of handpicked the players that I invited to play this campaign, and just a genuine sense of wanting to do some things in this campaign that I haven't really had the chance or done before, like do a spoken word intro like it was a screenplay. I don't know. All of them came together to make a really unique experience. So take from that what you will, Jody, but that's kind of everything that I was thinking going in, why I wanted to do this, and I just love these 6 principles.
They served from moment one in terms of like preview, email, hey, who's interested, because you included those really early on. And then we kind of had them there for every session. So they served huge dividends all the way through. The things that jump out to me about them and that I really hung my hat on, one, and this isn't so much, I don't know if there's a ton to talk about here, is the explanation around the parents. That included in those rules is, here is the relationship with your parents. Do not go to them for help. That's not the story we're telling.
Yep.
You will find it discouraging if you go to them for help. That's great. As players, again, it sets your compass. Why are your parents not helpful? All of us had very different versions of why our parents weren't helpful, and it was fascinating to watch those play out. The other piece is it tells the GM, here's how adults are going to behave. And so if, as a player, a adult interacting with your kid does not behave in that way, it is an immediate green light of, there is something here. This is the mystery. Because it's a mystery game. So
I guess I should have led with that. Yes.
It would be, I suppose it could be, the Lost Boys and you're out to kill the vampires. I guess it would be weird, but you could, I suppose, except for what I think is the one that just screams off the list as, here's what you need to know. The kids won't die. It is dangerous. You might get scared. You might get hurt, but you cannot die in this game. that in the greater RPG tapestry of all of the possible games you could be playing and all the different systems you could bring to try this in, simply saying that up front, your character will not die, full stop, is incredibly powerful because of what it asks the player to do and where the GM can let loose and has to show a little restraint. Also, as somebody who GMs, I GM for my wife pretty regular, and that's one of her non-negotiables is there's no kid death. Kid death is not, it's not even can be off screen. It is a hard no. That is not a thing we can do at the table ever. So we don't ever do that. So here's a game that's about putting kids in danger at all times that is totally safe to play. And that's amazing and informative and so powerful in terms of setting the tone as a player. It just was so empowering of a statement for me. And maybe this is where we're getting to the thing about as a player, it gave me a tremendous sense of responsibility. I felt a real sense of responsibility to not take that for granted.
Okay, so I want to talk about this because this is a Shadow Dark podcast, and I think that there's a genuine sense of pride that I see. Maybe not pride, but there are jokes often made about how lethal, like I've killed this many PCs. And we've said on the show before that like character death isn't the point of Shadow Dark, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm running a 5th edition game where the understanding is that character death is possible, but it is unlikely, and we are playing this campaign to see heroes be born and succeed, ultimately. I found this to be one of the most liberating and interesting things in my GMing career, because when you present players with a situation that might be in some way, shape, or form harmful to their character or potentially life-threatening, you see the most conservative choices made, right? Sometimes that means running away, and there's time and place for that. I don't know how you felt about it. You talked a little bit about it just now, but like for me as a GM to be able to put scenes out there and make them collaborative, and to have both myself and players be willing to create really rich scenes in which the kids were going to actively be in peril in some cases, but with the understanding that no one was going to die. I don't know. I felt like maybe it was the players, maybe it was all of you, because I just want to like compliment everyone who played in this campaign. I felt like everyone was on the same page almost from jump and almost at all times. This is the part of the campaign that I love the most. It was liberating and freeing to be able to just like not worry about that. I don't know. I don't want to ramble on, but like it was very interesting to see what happened when death was taken off the table.
Just be a kid is what it translated to for me. Be a kid. To the best of your ability, play like a kid. And I guess I will say the hard thing about this up front. If you're a GM and you're like, man, I've been curious about this for a while and I'd love to try it, or I want to try a game like this or take this approach to a game, or as a player, you're like, this sounds fun. If as a player at the table, you hear you can't die, and on any level that would lead to your play being flippant, this is not the game for you. You will have a suboptimal time. You will not see what I feel like we all saw, which was the very best of this system. We saw the very best of this world and Kids on Bikes as a system. We saw what it does really well and really clearly, and got to really revel in that. And when you're playing Shadow Dark and you have that, man, we got out of that by the skin of our teeth, and thank God you rolled a natural 20 when you did, and we turned those undead, and then you figured out the puzzle, and oh man, we had the rope in our backpack and we needed it to get through, and oh dude, that, and then shoot, and we're really bummed that Bill died, and our one character did fall behind, and God, just what a loss. But Like that's when Shadow Dark is like so good. And you're like, this system just created something special. If the players are going to be glib and flip because they can't die, to me, that is a non-starter. That is like, this is not going to be what you want. This is you're going to have a suboptimal time with this. And that's kind of nice on some level though, because it's like, hey, there's your ticket for entry is can you earnestly just be a kid for a few hours?
That's the thing. I think earnestness, I mean, I'll just own it that like, I like earnest role-playing games, and both games that I infuse earnestness into games that don't want it. I infuse earnestness into Shadow Dark, a game that I don't know is framed as earnest at almost any point. I think the designer is pretty earnest, and I would say that I don't think the game suffers from my earnestness that often. Sometimes it probably does. But this game and this campaign and the marriage of this setting with this system and these principles, these truths about the world and about our game, they're all infused with their own set of earnest role-playing, right? Like, you can't go to adults. You have to be the earnest kids that are oftentimes more precocious, more, almost like more responsible in their irresponsibility sometimes than regular real-life kids. I don't know. I felt like that earnestness was infused and was conveyed from the beginning. The other thing that I'll say is that I loved is the collaborative nature. Like I started almost every session asking each player to set their own scene in regular mundane life, not a part of the, like, I don't know. You had all these wonderful scenes that you came up with, Jody. And as a GM, that was just like such a gift. And I don't know that would work and be translatable to other role-playing games, Shadow Dark, at all. But I don't know. That was the other part that I deeply loved, was being able to ask all of you, what scene do you want to have right now?
That was really fun. I will say I took it, and this may be like a lot of GM brain as player bleeding together. I really enjoyed those for my character's solo moments, because that's largely how you framed it. It was like, yes, hey, you're at home with mom and dad, or you're at school in your math class, or you're, sitting there with your red yarn, for whichever kind of trope of a kid you are. We'll get into some mechanical things here in a minute. Where I really felt liberated by this is a collaborative game, and setting that as a table stakes for the campaign, was when somebody was doing something in a scene of interacting with a strange something, a robot, or, we were getting up to shenanigans. I felt really liberated to reach out to a fellow player and say, hey, you just said X, Y, and Z. Would it be cool if my character was doing ABC while you're doing X, Y, and Z? And then watching somebody else go, oh, and I could be 1, 2, 3. Yeah. And then that's how the scene unfolds, so that everybody is like, and then watching it go back to that person, they're like, oh, totally. Yeah, do that. And then and watching that kind of discussion in between players happen, that was really lovely. And I think that is something that could be adopted into any play group, with limits, that depending on the nature of things, because, if you're playing a game about swinging swords and killing orcs, then like, hey, there's a amount of retconning that we can't really be doing here. But there's an amount that you can, the bar scene and the low stakes fight, or the fun narrative bits that could be stolen and used elsewhere. But it was the invitation of collaborative storytelling to really play with the players. And in your framing of that, Matt, of like inviting the players to narrate their own individual scenes, and then like having that back and forth of you embodying their parents and watching, man, one of the players have this just incredible arc for their poor kiddo, having this realization of this very childlike to young, early teen realization of like, my parents are fallible. Adults are fallible. Like they're just people. They're not special. at all. And like watching his character in my first interactions be like, yes, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, and like, we'll just go to the adults. And then watching this player play through that growth was just, in the best possible way, heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Like it just really resonated in a way that was satisfying. You know, one of the best things I can say about the earnestness, and then maybe we'll move away from this, is multiple times we narrated our kids crying.
Yeah.
Like, and not like boo-hoo-hoo, they were crybabies at all. But like in the final, the big end, I think all but one of the characters was like was being narrated by their player of like, and my character is crying because as they're doing this thing. And then like, I was emotional, like as a player human, not my character, I was moved by that scene. Like it was, at one point it was a little bit tough to deliver my, like, and this is what my character is doing, even though I was super stoked on it. I'm like, my heart hurts for this kid and what he's telling the other kid in this collaborative scene. Oh my gosh. And I'm like, dude, that's, you know, we joke about theater kid energy, but holy cow, that is next level theater kid energy. So that was pretty cool. That all of those things really shone in a way that was unique, I think, to these systems. But speaking of systems, let's talk about some mechanics. I want to start with, unless there's somewhere else you want to go, the structure of the campaign, because that was super, super neat, especially for we had our summer break.
Sure.
As adult humans, as teachers, we have summer downtime. And then this worked really beautifully because it was a series of sessions. So walk through, let's jump to that.
All right. So this is the 4 Seasons of Mad Science, which, if you are looking for it, can be found in the Tales from the Loop role-playing game core rulebook. I have to plug this book. It is outstanding. The art is fantastic. The layout isn't necessarily like OSR standard of layout. I don't think it needs to be. It's an exceptional book. It has a campaign that we played. It also has other scenarios that we haven't, that I might run as one-shots. I don't know. It's such a great value. And we played the 4 Seasons of Mad Science, which is not meant to be played over the course of just 4 sessions. It's meant to be played over the course of probably about 6 sessions. There are 4 individual mysteries. Each takes place during a different season of the year. So all told, you cover about a year's worth of in-game time. The first mystery takes place in the summer, which makes sense that it happens just following summer break. And then you move through the year, and the last mystery takes place in the spring. Now, what's interesting about the core rulebook of Tales from the Loop is that, technically speaking, the setting itself is actually in Sweden. And the mysteries have these little bracketed callouts if you want to set it in Boulder City, Nevada, which is where we played, because it's just closer geographically and the names don't have strange, slash marks and things in them that I don't know how to say. That's the setup for this. It is, as I suggested up at the top of the episode, it is a tale of betrayal and love and all these wonderful things. And I think, with a few notes, it is an outstanding campaign. I think we are missing short, packaged campaigns that encourage you to have very condensed, intense experiences and then let them go. And that's what this was. We played it in the most condensed format I think you could probably make it, but all told, it's an exceptionally well-conceived way to present a campaign that feels like a full and complete entity.
I couldn't agree more. And this is a portable, all over the freaking place kind of idea. At time of recording, I just recently got back from a end of summer vacation of my own. Went up to Portland and happened to be up there for PDX Con, which is a very, very local little convention, is maybe a bit of a misnomer. So much so that when I reached out and was like, hey, I'd like to stop in, to see about getting a game, the guy was like, this isn't like at a hotel. This is just locals getting together at a cool location. And the reason I mentioned that is I was talking to the coordinator, thanking him for like trying to find my wife and I a game, and was just really welcoming in a way he didn't need to be, and was touched by that and wanted to share my appreciation. And he talked about the idea of like, man, in a playgroup having a cycle of GMs, and the cycle of GMs pick a system, run 4, 5, or 6 sessions, and while they're doing that, somebody else is prepping something else, and you're going to see a different game system, or go back to a campaign you're already playing, and then somebody else does that, and then the next GM steps in, and then the next GM steps in, and you're always getting to just see different systems and different ideas and different. And I was so touched by that, and partly because I'd just come off of this Tales from the Loop experience, and you and I have been talking about my Salt Marsh Saturdays, that I'm kind of scheduling 3 to 4 sessions at a pop. And then I go, okay, we're going to be at a kind of a crossroads, and then we'll see where we're at, and then we'll pick up. And we just had a session end in a way that like split parties and sent off people in all these different directions. And I couldn't help but find myself thinking about this structure of, so 3 or 4 sessions go by, and then you take maybe downtime, but why can't downtime be a couple months? Why can't downtime be an extended period? And in a weird way, like how much more rich that narrative would be, even in a fantasy setting. That if we went out and we adventured and we have this windfall, maybe we made enough money that we can be off and not risk our life and well-being for a couple months, or we need to make enough money to get through the winter. Like winter's coming and we can't go adventure because we're going to be snowed in or whatever. And now Tales from the Loop admittedly does this in a very different way because of school, admittedly. Like every time the kids are playing and they have the free time because they're on winter break, spring break, whatever American school break it may be, that they can go run amok. But I was like, there's no reason you couldn't take that structure, which I just thought was brilliant and was really fun because it allowed us to play at the intersection. I thought you were really smart for doing it this way, of that intersection between school is getting out and we're about to go on break, or break is ending and we're going to have to go back to school. Yeah. And what do those things mean for these kids was part of that boring reality, but it also created the ticking clock. So that campaign structure, I think it worked beautifully for this. And holy cow, creators out there, if you're listening, couldn't agree with you more on the, like, here is a 4 episode, 4 session arc. And that's it. That's it. That's the whole thing. You're all done. Go play something else. Like, yeah, there really are. I mean, it seems to either be here is a one shot or here is the rest of your life. You are going to be underground.
Well, so in Shadowdark sort of world, we have dungeons. Like people are making dungeons. Sure. And, this is actually one of my, somebody was just talking about this on the Discord. This is one of my contentions with the OSR as a philosophy and as just a general kind of vibe. This is something that I believe very deeply as a GM, is that the thing that is lacking most in RPGs is closure. And a lot of what I see in the OSR is, oh, you don't need to explore the entire dungeon. Or, oh, well, campaigns don't need to end with closure. They're, you just play and you just play to play, and the story is what happens, and the story is the story and doesn't need a satisfying conclusion. I contend that is not true for most players. I think most players would like to see a campaign end in a satisfying way. And that just means that there's some narrative stakes and that those narrative stakes wrap up, even if it's just the GM saying, I can't run this campaign anymore. I'm going to narrate and let all of you narrate a little bit of what happens at the end of this game. Giving closure to a campaign is something that I strive for, and I have, since I started GMing and since I started this hobby, the one thing you hear time after time after time is, oh yeah, we started Curse of Strahd and we didn't finish. Oh yeah, we started, pick your campaign, pick your dungeon or whatever, we didn't finish. We talked about this in our Barrow Maze episode, that like we were never going to finish Barrow Maze, and I don't know that the that the purpose of a mega dungeon is to finish it, but you need a sense of closure if you're going to end. And even the 3D6 Down the Line guys talked about this in their Arden Vool retrospective, that like there was a sense of closure that they felt like that story reached a point where they could stop and step away from it in a satisfying way. And there's just something to an adventure or a mystery or a campaign like this where we got to the end and the story was over. It didn't mean there weren't loose ends that you guys, like there were tons of things that were left unresolved. But the story for these 4 or 5 kids was over. And we could leave it and remember them and know that there were other things they were going to get up to, but we didn't have to tell that story. And that I thought was very telling, and it was a lot of confirmation bias. And it really spoke to me. It was like, no, this is important. It is important in any game where the purpose is, at least even nominally, is to tell a story. Even people who I think are like, no, I do not run the game to tell a story. I run the game to run the game, and a story is what happens in the aftermath. I think even then, dude, you got to have some resolution. You got, like, I don't know.
Well, the 8 million YouTube videos talking about how to introduce and satisfyingly use the BBEG says there's something to what you're saying. There's at least something. So let me talk. I want to stick with that.
OSR.
But the OSR. But I want to talk about Tales from the Loop and Kids on Bikes and what you ran here. Yeah. And specifically, you made a choice, ? Because obviously I haven't read the campaign. That would have made it suck.
Especially for a mystery.
Yeah. Aha. Bob did it. How'd you know? I read it. One of the player characters, was essential to the through line of the mystery that led to resolution. The resolution was the resolution of this particular character's family member that we traced across all 4 sessions. So there was a person up to shenanigans, and we were following their story. First, is that a tweak you added to go, it's going to be attached to this character? And if you did make that tweak, obviously it played out pretty well, but it's a bold move, Cotton.
It was a bold move, wasn't it? I made a gamble. I made a tactical, a somewhat high stakes gamble. The central sort of character, the person who is the antagonist of this this 4 mystery arc, is integral. The mysteries don't necessarily assume that the person is attached as a familial attachment. They just need to be attached in some way to the player characters or what have you, right? That's how you get buy-in. I'll be honest with you. I started the first session and I had no idea how this person was going to be attached. It is literally the linchpin of the campaign.
Yeah.
And I started with a big question mark. And the first session, which you did not play in,
right.
which is actually where that introduction that I read at the beginning of the episode came from, which actually probably revealed some things that...
It does indeed.
It foreshadows quite a bit of what happens in the last... So maybe we can come back to the fact that I basically just dropped all these crazy clues and foreshadowing all over the place, again, as if this was some kind of a television show or whatever. That came out of a scene that one of our players set up, and I said, oh, you have an aunt. And I just interjected into the scene with one of her parents and said, oh, your aunt has been fired from this job, et cetera, et cetera. And I just collaboratively levied this person without this player's knowledge onto her via her parents. And it was a total throwaway line. And what was beautiful about how this worked is this player had signed up to play in all 4 sessions. And at one point we had to reschedule the finale session, the final session. And I was like so deeply worried that she was not going to be able to be there. But I was like, we're doing this. It's going to end, closure, et cetera. See previous statement. She was able to be there. And I was elated that this player was able to be there because her character was attached to this linchpin NPC. Boy, did that work out for me. Boy, could it have completely gone sideways.
Well, yeah, I'm preaching to the choir who had the other experience. Calculated risk, listener beware. Make sure that if you're going to do this, the person is at all interested in this sort of thing. Not you need to ask them, but not all players want the spotlight on them.
Yeah.
Or are comfortable. I think that's a better way to say it even. There are players who are not comfortable having the spotlight on them, and having had the experience with a player who does not like the spotlight on them and does not like to be handed the narrative steering wheel, it is maximum not fun for them, tried this, and it was to the detriment of all. And it made for less fun for everybody involved. And it wasn't until way too far in retrospective that I went like, oh, this person doesn't want to do that. And I'm asking them to do something they don't want to do. They were a novice enough player that they didn't have those words because they were just playing. And I, as a GM, hadn't seen this go this way before. So it really worked out. I can't even imagine having played the last session with that player not being at the table. That would have been a next level for a campaign that had a lot of your really good sleight of hand. That would have been next level. That would have been something else if she had not been able to play with us in that last session.
So I do want to call this. I want to talk about the system and the mechanics at some point. And I don't just want to wax poetic about our campaign but like it was a risk. Like it could have really, really, really fallen flat. I had a few things that I knew I could do behind the scenes, but one thing I want to point out is that when you're playing through a mystery, like a Call of Cthulhu campaign or whatever, one of the things that I think is super fun about moving away from Shadowdark for a little while and playing other games is it gives you different creative outlets. One of the ripcords I had that I knew I could lean on was I made you guys handouts basically for every session, which were newspapers. And I sent them to you. They were in-world artifacts that I had written, and there were things in them that I knew you guys would never find that I put there just because I thought they were fun. And there were also things that I knew you would find, and I knew you would think were weird and might follow up on and might not. And through those, I knew I had a narrative in-world tool that I could, if I knew that this player wasn't going to be there, I could pull on your heartstrings. I could have that player go missing, and you find out about it in the newspaper. And then now there's an in. And so there were things that I could have done that were drastic measures that would have alleviated the problem that you just can't do if you do that in like a Shadowdark, like a fantasy RPG, where the conceit is that players have way more narrative control. Even though we were doing this very collaboratively, everyone knew that we were trying to solve a mystery. Everyone was on the same page about what we were doing. And in a game where it is much more of a sandbox and the GM isn't like, slowly revealing the plot coupons and players are on board with finding plot coupons and redeeming them for the story, that doesn't work as well. And so I don't know how it would translate to a Shadowdark game. I don't know that it necessarily even needs to, but it was super fun to be able to foreshadow things in written scenes and newspapers. And I will post all these things to the show notes. But that was my thinking, was this is a high wire act. If it pays off in the way that I hope it does, it will be great. There are also ways that I have to mitigate it. Let me transition us here awkwardly away from that kind of high level discussion down to some nuts and bolts. Let's get into the nitty and the gritty. The system at the top, you mentioned you love exploding dice. There are some other mechanical considerations to this system that I actually really enjoyed and I think might be stealable for other game uses at other tables, like maybe Shadowdark.
it's a thought, but talk to us. What do you like about this system other than exploding dice, which are fun, I guess?
They are. So I'll just give a big top level takeaways of Kids on Bikes. I ignored actually quite a few of the mechanics and rules. I think the rule book is one of the worst laid out rule books I've ever read. I think it's pretty poorly written. I think the core system is excellent. I think the fact that your bike gives you bonuses mechanically when you're near it or on it is awesome. It is a game that is super simple to teach. It is probably one of the best like beginner friendly role-playing games. Everyone knows what it's like to be a kid. Everyone knows what it's like to go to school and be off for summer break. If you want to introduce somebody to role-playing games, boy howdy, you could do a lot worse than Kids on Bikes. Just don't try and learn the game by reading the rule book, because there's so many extra words and there are so many mechanics in there. It feels like an over-designed game. So the core mechanic is you have a bunch of attributes, you roll a die, you try and hit a target number. The target number is set by the GM, and it is anywhere between like 1 and a bazillion. I don't know. I just kind of use static DCs because I like static DCs from Shadowdark, so I kind of ported those over and fudged them a little bit. There's degree of success criteria. I completely ignored that and just said, oh, you succeeded by a lot, so you are very successful. Or there's actually numerical bands of like how much did you succeed by. That kind of stuff drives me bonkers. I also use the Shadowdark like, all right, well, if your trope, because each player picks a trope for their character and that gives them a bunch of details about their character. If your trope would suggest that you're good at this, you just succeed, unless the kind of Shadowdark 3 things, time, tools, and training, or the trope equivalents of. Yeah. Oh my gosh, there you go. Perfect. Unless you don't have those things, then you roll a die. But if you do, you don't have to roll. I didn't use. There's a whole other section in there for like what's called a powered character, which is kind of like 11 from Stranger Things, which is like a character that everyone plays collaboratively. Didn't use that. Way over designed. There's mechanics for using things on your character sheet, like the things you're afraid of, or I didn't really use any of that. So I actually can't review the system honestly, because I basically ignored, I would say, well over 50% of it in favor of just letting all of you write down stuff in your character sheet and role play it accurately, and with the understanding that I would in turn have the world react in interesting ways, and that we would tell an interesting story without the need for a bunch of cruft.
I can't agree enough about this being a great introduction to RPGs for somebody, especially somebody who maybe is a little put off by the wizards and dragons or lightsabers or non-copyright infringing, of course. That sort of thing, just because the nostalgia of it being set in 1987, anybody who is somewhat familiar with that world in that time, it's going to sing for them. Also, your stats of fight, flight, brains, brawn, charm, and grit. There are 6 of them, and they correspond to the 6 classic dice. So a D4, D6, D8, D10, D12, D20. So as a player, you get to roll all the funky shaped dice. You use all of the funky shaped dice. You don't skip any of them, which for every new player to the classic fantasy D20 system, they're like, I use this one. Oh, that one's the D20. Okay, what are these other ones for? You might use them, maybe.
You'll probably never roll a D12, but the rest of them you might actually roll.
Yeah, so it's got that. Man, the character sheet could be better. The less said about that.
It is a character sheet.
So here is when I rattled through the stats, and why I want to just quickly dunk on it one more time, is 2 of the stats are fight and flight. You'll note there is 1 letter difference between those, and the font they elected to use, the letters touch each other and rub together. So at a glance, and as somebody with a very mild dyslexia myself, man, talk about an unkind thing to do on a character sheet, to have fight and flight next to each other and have them in a font that has touching letters. Not cool. Also, brains and brawn a little further apart just because of the way a W and an I are shaped, but holy cow, really do me a solid, guys. What is rad, though, that I love mechanically about Kids on Bikes that you didn't touch on in your love fest of it, is two things. The adversity tokens of you get points that you can just spend on things. Anytime you fail, you gain these tokens. So failing rolls has a reward to it. And there's lots of systems that do this. There's also a series of traits, I believe they're called, of you are cool under pressure. You're easygoing. You're gross. You're tough. You're a treasure hunter. You're wealthy. You're prepared. Something like that.
I actually used those.
We used those. And they, much like a character class in Shadowdark says, hey, here's what you're good at. And this is the kind of kid you are. Two people could play the same trope of the math wizard and then have different traits. And those kids would feel wildly different. Yeah. I played the eccentric recluse kid that could easily be the like weird goth kid, and you would pick certain traits to be the weird goth kid.
I think they're called advantages or something like that. But like regardless of what they're called, yes, they give you, some of them give you like, you know, like literal like powerful things you can do if you spend adversity tokens.
Right,
and they're quite cool.
Bonuses to die rolls, and when your DC is a 6 and you're rolling, a D4, man, a +2 seems really good. The other thing that I loved, though, was, so my kid was not a goth kid or a punk rocker or any of that. He was just the weird outdoorsy kid who would much rather be out in the woods than have anything to do with any adults. And then I played him with like a crippling fear of adults, but was like totally normal around other kids. And any of us, I knew many of that kid. To a small degree, was that kid for a while. So, those traits, though, just really brought the kids to life in a way without being, and then I have this superpower. It was actually a little bit weird when somebody was like, actually, I'm going to use some adversity tokens because I have this advantage. Yeah. And it was always a little like, oh, yeah, there's like rules for this game. Cool. Which is, yeah. I said this so many times. I use this analogy too much. When you're watching a sporting event, and you never notice the officials, but you know they officiated a good game. Ugh, magic.
Yeah.
And the parts of Kids on Bikes we used did that.
Yeah.
It allowed us to play. There was a clear framework for decision making and deciding of fates and doing all the things an RPG does. And it never felt like it was in the way of the fun. It was just letting us freaking play the game. Which is, that's what you want. And you want it in a way that's accessible. I am reminded of, Matt, I don't know if you're familiar with the Mazes RPG.
No, not familiar.
It is touted and designed as a really powerful introduction to RPGs.
Interesting.
But what it does is it goes, you are a D4. Your class is a D4. Your class is a D6. You are a D10. And then that's the die you use for everything all the time. And it uses sometimes rolling high is good, sometimes rolling low is good in a very simple and accessible way. I'll be honest, well, that does, having read through Mazes a few times, I'm like, oh yeah, man, great introductory game, especially if you want to do swords and wizardry and fantasy and stuff. I honestly will say, I think Kids on Bikes is even better just at its core of the bigger the die, the better you are at the thing.
Yeah.
And it just works so smoothly. Would it work great for a swords and sorcery stab people game? Probably not. Probably not, because it's a very simple decider system. But did I enjoy it, and did allow for, as a player, you want to play the game, right? There's an amount of, yes, we're telling a make-believe story, but I also have stuff on my sheet that says I get to do things, and I want to do those things. And the bike mechanic cannot be overstated. You mentioned it, of like... Man, the effort you will narratively go to try and keep your bike with you is pretty funny. And then I was reminded of being a kid, the spots I lugged my bike to.
I would forget that was, here's the thing that's cool about this game is that really the GM doesn't have to roll any dice. And I love a game where the GM doesn't have to roll any dice to a certain degree. I love rolling dice as a GM. It's great. I still did roll dice. I re-rolled some opposed checks. These are not really things in the game, but what I appreciate though about a game where GMs don't roll very many dice is you start forgetting the rules almost. You start forgetting that characters have powers, because you're not piloting monsters that have abilities, or, you know, other NPCs that have like these cool attributes and things. So I would legitimately forget that your bikes had actual real mechanical value. And there were a couple of times where I was like, why do they keep trying to bring their bikes here?
Well, because we're kids and we want our bikes with us.
And then the scene would unfold, and you'd be like, do I get my bike bonus? And I'd be like, oh my God, your bike is here. Yes. Dang it. I should have made it harder for them to bring the bikes. But it was, in all seriousness, I say that in jest. I did feel like what few rules there are in the system for, you know, as complicated of a story as we played, and as many things happened, there were enough rules to buoy us through the moments where we needed adjudication.
I'm going to critique you on one thing. There was a mechanical thing I wish I saw it referenced, and I wish it would have shown up. There are rules in Kids on Bikes about how people influence each other, because as a young person, the power of persuasion and influence of a bully interacting with you, or a teacher asking you to do something, or I know there's some mechanics there, and we really didn't mess with those much. Yeah. I think, but this may be a deal breaker for some players, to be told your character reacts like this. You know, that could be a non-starter for some players, because that's taking their autonomy away, or demanding that they adjust their decision making. But it felt so honest to the characters and the experience that, like, yeah, you want to kiss her, but nah, man, you're not that cool. Yeah. So make the roll, and no, you're not brave enough, or you're too intimidated, or, you know, yeah, maybe you want to punch the bully who's standing in front of you, but I don't know, man. Let's see if you can get past that. You know, and there's some rules clearly about that sort of thing. I noticed some of the talents or abilities allow you to get past that under certain conditions. But other than that, and I think this is maybe a tilting of the hand, if you will, Matt and I's deep love for rules light, so that we can just tell an outstanding story. So let's take a quick break. Let's hear from our sponsors, and then let's see what we can bring into the light.
This spring break, the battle for Boulder City blasts off. That's right, kids. Hopper's Arcade is launching its first ever Astro Blaster tournament. And the stakes, well, they're out of this world. It's open to players of ages 9 to 16, and the winner will take home $50 in cold, hard cash, along with a signed poster from the game's actual developer. And get this, a permanent high score will be added under your initials. That's bragging rights forever. Owner Stuart Hopper says the turnout this year will be, quote, astronomical. So, the competition starts Wednesday. Bring your quarters, bring your reflexes, and bring your name. Because if you win, it's going up in lights. Come out to Hopper's Arcade, where legends are made 1 quarter at a time.
Thank you to Hopper's Arcade for sponsoring this episode. It is time for us to bring this topic into the light. Matt, kick us off. What's your core takeaway from your experience with Tales from the Loop and Kids on Bike 2nd Edition?
I think that the first takeaway is that anemoia, which is a term that I can never remember. I'm going to have to look up, but it is...
ironic.
It is... I know. Oh, that's very... Yes! Oh, so good. Anemoia is real. And anemoia is the feeling of nostalgia for a time that you didn't grow up during, or that is never known, that you can't know. And I didn't grow up in the 80s, but there is something so lovely about playing a role-playing game set in the 1980s, in the modern era, about kids who probably would have played a role-playing game. I don't know. There's just something very circular and sort of, it feels like you're closing the loop a little bit, and really bringing the the game back to whence it came. I don't know. There was just something very nice about it. I don't really have a takeaway here. It was just fun to play in the 80s that never was.
Yeah, and is also hyper relevant to the OSR in whatever the heck that means.
Oh, nice.
We're in there. All right. One of my takeaways as a player in Tales from the Loop that I will be adapting into my GMing, and I've been working on more and more, is the power of friendly but benign NPCs. Finding characters that are there, like a parent maybe. They can give you info. They can give you support. They'll give you a hug. They're there to hold your hand. They're there to tell you it's okay. They're there to cry with you when a beloved party member passes on. And then they say, well, I don't know, kid. What do you got next? And send you packing out the door with your feelings and your sword. A friendly NPC who is just part of the world is magic and can make the world real in a way that I think is often overlooked.
That's a great point, Jody. I hadn't even thought of that. My next one is handouts. Oh, my gosh.
Good. Sorry, yours were great. Okay, I'll shut up. Go.
I wanted to use this as an excuse to return to one of my favorite forms of storytelling in role-playing games, doing the thing that only role-playing games can do, which is that organic storytelling and then codify the world in handouts that spoke to the situations and the story that we were all telling. I did that in the form of newspapers that I wrote and that were there to provide red herrings and all sorts of weird things that the players could read into. And I think that they genuinely improve the game. And I think that handouts are something that if you're playing in person or online, they can just so elevate the game. They are labor intensive, but they pay off in dividends.
Absolutely. Those were, I cannot give you enough props for how cool those were. I want to say my wife is genuinely bummed. She could have played. You sent her the sign up. She was given the option. One of them had a series of clues and mistakes in it that I know, like just telling her about it, she was like twitching about not having seen it. So yes, handouts are dope. You know what else is cool? Earnestly playing. Not being afraid to really just live in the moment, be vulnerable with your friends, and let that special experience happen at the table. I don't care how sappy I sound. This is why I'm not earnest often, because my skin is crawling. So, as the torchlight grows dim, we hope you were able to find something useful in this episode that you can take into a future game. If you have any questions or unique experiences from your table that you'd like us to discuss in a future episode, you can email us at dmdiariespod@gmail.com. You can also reach out via YouTube or Facebook, but best of all, you can get at us on the Dungeon Master Diaries thread on the Shadow Dark Discord channel. You can find links to those feeds and any other materials we referenced in this episode's show notes. Until next time, may the nostalgia of yesterday's memories shine a light on the darkness of today.
Dungeon Master Diaries is a production of Stingbat Radio Network. It's produced by Jody Kropholler, edited by Matt Bruner. Our outro music is composed by the so ridiculous Christian Schuster. The Dungeon Master Diaries is an independent production, is not affiliated with the Arcane Library LLC. Shadowrock RPG is a product of the Arcane Library. Copyright 2023. Get me the hell out of here.
That's why I don't do earnest, man.